Coming to you live from the Tino Studios in Minooka, Illinois. I'm your host, Bucky Shanks, and this is Tino Tonight. Welcome everybody to the Week 9 edition of Tino Tonight. 9 weeks in the books and only 2 games left in the regular season. The top 25 went 18-7 in Week 8, the top 10 went 8-2, and the top 5 went 4-1. Oklahoma was the first team to clinch a spot in the conference title game. 20 teams are officially mathematically eliminated from playing in their conference championship. And we are also going to move forward without one of our staples of the program. Beatdown of the Week, as you have seen every week, will no longer be featured on Tino Tonight. It's just too tough to determine if a team is tanking or just simply can't compete. It was a lot better early on when everyone is competing, but with dynasties comes tanking. It's just part of the process. But before we dive any deeper, let's have a word from one of our sponsors.
Do you ever want to learn how to draft Johnny Manziel #1 overall? Do you want to learn how to trade up for a stopgap like Robert Ayers? Well, now you can at Clown School Community College. Yup, it's a thing. Have you ever been in a league and not made the playoffs for 8 straight years? Me neither, but we'll show you how at Clown School Community College. So come on down today. Last year we were voted #1 to fuck up your league and piss off owners. There's not a better college out there than Clown College. Classes starting today.
Welcome back, everybody. Still ahead on this week's show, we have some of the usual suspects. Stock Watch, the reveal of the top 25, the postseason if the season ended today. But right now, we jump into Squeak of the Week. And for Squeak of the Week, we go to the ACC for this week's close call. Wake Forest took their shorthanded Demon Deacons into Death Valley as they started 5 players that were guaranteed zeros between buys and injuries. But in Death Valley, the only one that seems to be dying is Clemson. Wake Forest got their first conference win by the score of 940.65 to 916.60. The 24.05 point win is the 17th closest game in Tino history. It's a short history, getting longer, but still a very short history, but history nonetheless. And we go to Stack Watch. We start with Alabama. The Crimson Tide beat number 19 LSU in Week 8, and in Week 9 they took out number 2 Tennessee. If you're paying attention like Bucky is, then you shouldn't be surprised. Coach Chris Vardy has made a living to this point out of beating ranked teams. He is now 5-1 versus the top 25. The 5 wins versus ranked competition are the most in the country. Mississippi State is up next, fresh off beating number 25 LSU. Florida State makes the list this week after beating number 7 Clemson in Week 8 and following that up by beating the Yellow Hot Yellow Jackets in Week 9. These 2 wins get Cam and company back to 500 versus the top 25. Next up, a suddenly high-flying Miami team that scored 11-01 and 12-05 the last 2 weeks. Oregon State, they've been moving and shaking as well, taking out not just back-to-back top 25 teams, try back-to-back top 10 teams. The Beavers took out number 8 Washington in Week 8 and then beat number 9 UCLA in Week 9. Oregon State is 3-3 versus the top 25. Still have Oregon in the regular season finale to get a 7th game versus ranked teams under their belts. But next up in a classic look-ahead spot is Arizona, who is currently stuck in a 3-game losing streak. The top 25 is up next, but before we get to that, we got to pay some bills. So another word from our sponsor. Anytime you're in the top 25 and score 806 points and win, a Corona gets its lime. Anytime you're 7th in the ACC in points but first in the conference, a Corona gets its lime. And anytime you start Cleveland Farrell and he gets 2.5 sacks and 97.75 points, a Corona gets its lime. Anytime you're on the bubble of making the playoffs and see 2 unranked teams remaining on the schedule, a Corona gets its lime. We now jump into the top 25 with 2 weeks left to go. Number 25, Texas 5-4. The Longhorns rejoin the top 25 after beating Kansas State. They sit 5th in the Big 12 and have TCU, who sits 6th in the Big 12 on deck. Number 24, California 5-4. The Golden Bears rejoin the top 25 after beating USC. They sit 5th in the Pac-12 and have UCLA on deck, followed by Colorado in the regular season finale. Consider Cal a dark horse to make a run at the playoffs if they can get by UCLA in Week 10. Number 23, Syracuse 5-4. The Orange are doing their best Tom Petty impersonation because all they're doing right now is free falling. They have lost back-to-back games versus number 11 Virginia Tech and number 13 NC State. Winnable games are ahead as Wake Forest and Notre Dame are all that's left, and they have a combined 3 wins in the conference. If Syracuse wants any shot at the playoffs, they must win out. Number 22, Auburn 5-4. The Tigers have won 3 straight and sit 5th in the SEC. After back-to-back wins, they beat up a tanking South Carolina team, now get a tanking Georgia team. They'll be 6-4 heading into the season finale with Alabama. Number 21, Clemson 5-4. Last week, we said, what did Clemson have in common with 7 other teams? The answer was, they were all winless versus ranked teams. One of the teams on that list was Wake Forest. They're no longer on that list as they have nothing in common because they just beat a ranked Clemson team. Knock it off, Bucky. After the bad loss, the Tigers made a midseason coaching change and they brought in Dave LeBee. He's got a tall task ahead of him as they have number 11 NC State up next. This is an absolute must-win for the Tigers. Number 20, Vanderbilt 6-3. The Commodores are a 6-3 team that has been just picking its spots on the schedule. 2 of the last 3 games have been versus tanking teams, and they scored in the 800s both times. Most recently, 806 versus Georgia, which would have been a loss to just about anyone else. The schedule closes with 2 top 10 teams in Arkansas and Tennessee. Vandy is going to need to find the offense and find it fast. Number 19, Georgia Tech 5-4. The Yellow Jackets are no longer yellow hot as they got taken down last week by Florida State. The 5-game winning streak they were previously on helped them get to this point, however. They are 4th in the conference, can still make the conference title game by winning out. They have their biggest game of the season up next versus Virginia Tech. Number 18, Michigan 6-3. The Wolverines have won 2 straight and find themselves in 3rd in the Big Ten. They will need to win out versus Michigan State and Ohio State to have a chance at the playoffs. The Big Ten title game appears to potentially be set between Wisconsin and Ohio State, so the Wolverines will want to focus on just winning and finding a seat in the field of 16. Number 17, Oregon State 5-4. The Beavers are probably one of, if not the, most underrated team in the country. All 4 of their losses are to the teams currently ranked. They are currently on a 3-game winning streak after taking down Washington and UCLA. They currently sit 3rd, just a game behind Oregon and Washington State. They have Arizona this week and have to be careful not to get caught looking ahead to the finale with the Ducks. That game will likely decide which team from Oregon will be going to the Pac-12 title game. Number 16, UCLA 5-4. The field of 16 better just hope UCLA keeps finding ways to lose. The Bruins currently sit 7th in the Pac-12. They averaged 1,081 points per game, good enough for 3rd in the land, but they just can't catch a break with the schedule and can't stop anyone. This team couldn't stop a nosebleed. 5th most points against has them sitting 3-4 in the Pac-12. The Bruins get number 24 Cal, and the playoff team better hope Cal does them a solid and win, as that will likely knock UCLA out of the playoffs. They would have USC on deck, and a win versus the 1-8 Trojans isn't going to impress the committee. Number 15, Wisconsin 6-3. The Badgers have won 4 straight and have 2 games ahead they are likely to be favored in. The most recent win is all but assured that Brosty will have his Badgers sitting in the Big Ten title game. Iowa and Rutgers are left for Wisconsin. Number 14, Michigan State 6-3. The Spartans, a lot like UCLA, throw up a ton of points, but also give up a ton of points. Michigan State sits 4th in the Big Ten, currently riding a 3-game winning streak. The Big Ten title game looks out of reach at this point, but winning out, including a win versus number 18 Michigan, will go a long way in making sure the Spartans punch their ticket to the field of 16. Number 13, Washington 6-3. The Huskies sit 4th in the Pac-12. The good news for them is they have Oregon and Washington State ahead. The bad news for them is they have Oregon and Washington State ahead. Coach Tussin, your mission is simple. Beat Oregon, beat Washington State, and you will find yourself in the Pac-12 title game. Lose to either, and you leave your fate in the hands of others. My man Jigsaw said it best, live or die, the choice is yours. Number 12, Florida State 6-3. After telling everyone about the future of the Seminoles last week on the program, a lot of eyes were focused on Florida State. Cam and company enjoyed the attention and didn't let Bucky down as they beat number 12 Georgia Tech and took Coach Brigham's rank as the Seminoles now sit 12. Florida State is 3rd in the ACC and a game behind NC State and Virginia Tech. Miami is up next with NC State in the finale. Number 11, NC State 7-2. Coach Ward has continued to prove what he calls his haters wrong. Now 7-2, 1st in the ACC, the Wolfpack control their own destiny. they don't have a bad loss on the resume, as number 1 Oklahoma and number 19 Georgia Tech have been the only two to slow this team down. A win-hungry Clemson team and the Seminoles are all that's left and all that's between NC State and the ACC title game. Number 10 Iowa State 6-3. The Cyclones have won 4 straight, and 3 of those wins were versus ranked teams. The Big 12 title game is basically settled, with Oklahoma officially clinching a spot last week. Kansas would need to lose the next 2 games versus West Virginia and Kansas State, and Iowa State win both in order to leave Kansas. The Jayhawks beat the Cyclones back in Week 5, claiming the tiebreaker. Iowa State will want to win out to make it hard to be left out of the field of 16. Number 9 Kansas, 7-2. The Jayhawks have won 2 straight and have really found the offense lately, scoring over 2,300 points in the last 2 weeks. They are heavy favorites in their next 2 games and only need to win 1 to clinch their spot in the Big 12 title game. However, that spot's going to be versus Oklahoma, so not exactly a very fun place to try and get to. Number 8, Virginia Tech, 7-2. The Hokies have won 3 straight and control their own destiny to the ACC title game. They have Georgia Tech and Miami still to go. The loss to NC State earlier this year could be costly, pending how the next 2 weeks play out. Number 7, Tennessee, 7-2. The loss last week to Alabama marks the first time the Volunteers haven't been in the top 5 since Week 5. Tennessee sits 3rd in the SEC, trailing the only 2 teams that beat them this year, Arkansas and Alabama. Florida and Vanderbilt are all that's left for Tennessee. Number 6, Washington State, 7-2. The Cougars are riding a 5-game winning streak. They look the part of a playoff team, averaging over 1,000 points per week. A win this week versus Colorado would all but clinch a playoff spot for this squad. They look to have the inside track on the Pac-12 title game. Colorado is next. Washington's on deck. In the top 5, number 5, Arkansas, 7-2. The Razorbacks have won 2 straight and just put up the 2nd most points in league history this past week versus Florida. After being upset versus Auburn a couple weeks ago, the Razorbacks find themselves in 1st in the SEC with Vanderbilt and LSU left to play. Number 4, Alabama, 7-2. Since losing to Arkansas back in Week 4, the Crimson Tide has won every game since, stacking the winning streak up to 5. Dead set on getting another crack at Arkansas this year. The only thing between Alabama and the SEC title game is Mississippi State and Auburn. Number 3, Ohio State, 8-1. The Buckeyes have won 8 straight, which is the longest in the country. The only thing between them and a perfect season at this point is a Week 1 loss to currently ranked number 6 Washington State. A tanking Purdue team is on deck before number 18 Michigan in a rivalry game. Look for the Buckeyes to roll this weekend. Number 2, Oregon, 8-1. Since losing to Cal back in Week 3, all the Ducks have done is win 6 straight and take all of USC's good players. The shocking thing about this, as great of a season as it's been, they have Washington State, Oregon State, and Washington all within a game, and Cal within 2 games and holds the tiebreaker. The Ducks control their own destiny, however. They have number 13 Washington this weekend, and a win here would put all of that to bed. Number 1, Oklahoma, 8-1. Received 9 first-place votes. Yeah, the committee has 10, and we have 9 first-place votes, which means the committee will be accepting applications this offseason for anyone who is interested. Back to Oklahoma, the Sooners, since losing to now tanking Georgia in Week 2, they've won 7 straight. They clinched their Big 12 spot in the title game this week when they beat Baylor. The last 3 weeks, Oklahoma has won by over 300 points. Oklahoma State and Texas are all that's left for the favorites to win the national championship. And here is the updated postseason play if the season ended today. The Gator Bowl would feature TCU versus Florida. The Outback Bowl would feature Arizona State versus Baylor. The Citrus Bowl would be LSU versus Miami. And the Peach Bowl would be Rutgers versus Texas Tech. The Cotton Bowl would be Nebraska versus Texas. And the Orange Bowl would be California versus Syracuse. The Fiesta Bowl would be Auburn versus Clemson, and the Rose Bowl would be Vanderbilt versus Georgia Tech. The Sugar Bowl would be Michigan versus Oregon State. In the playoffs, if the season ended today, number 1 Oklahoma would face number 16 UCLA, number 8 Virginia Tech would take on number 9 Kansas, number 5 Arkansas would take on number 12 Florida State, number 4 Alabama would take on number 13 Washington. Number 6 Washington State would take on number 11 NC State. Number 3 Ohio State would take on number 14 Michigan State. Number 7 Tennessee would take on number 10 Iowa State. And number 2 Oregon would take on number 15 Wisconsin. And that'll do it for Tino NCAA and Tino Tonight. For everybody here at Tino Studios, I'm Bucky Shanks, and we'll see you next week. Good night, everybody.